Morning. Excited to announce that Kyle Federico received the Lou Groza Weekly Award. I'm not sure if it came out today, but I received it today. One of three kickers nationally to be honored for their efforts last weekend. Yes, that's an exciting award for him to get, and I don't think it'll be the last one he gets. We're really pleased with the way he's come along as a true freshman, and to make a 52-yard field goal in his home state, longer field goal than he ever made in high school. That was a great boost to us before halftime. We're pleased and excited to be 3-0, and certainly have a tremendous challenge ahead of us this week, going on the road to play what is a really talented Arkansas football team. And with that, I would open it up for questions.
Kyle, what do you make of their situation? I guess Tyler Wilson tried to rally the troops, even though he didn't play in the game, and they had a bad outing. Lost the week before to a Sun Belt Conference team. It looks like they're in a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, I don't know per se what the mood is in their locker room. I know it's hard when you lose your starting quarterback, and he is a tremendous football player, and we are preparing as if he's playing this week, and I would imagine that with him on the field, they'll be a completely different team. I mean, he's one of the elite quarterbacks in the country. A great challenge for our defense to defend him and the weapons that they have. But I don't know if I want to say, I don't know what their climate would be like in their locker room. I'm sure that their approach would be much like ours. They want to be 1-0 this week.
Can you update your injury situation, Savon, Civil specifically?
Sure. Andre was out there running around last night, so we feel good about the fact that he'll be available to us. Savon, not as optimistic at this point. We'll make a final decision a little later in the week, but he was not with us at practice yesterday. Came out of the game about as healthy, I think, as you come out of any game. I don't think there were any additional injuries that will keep anybody out, except for maybe Tartikoff with the hands, just because his role as a holder. If he's not ready to go, we'll keep using Justin, who did a really nice job.
If Savon can't go, can Juwan do 41 carries again?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it certainly helps that we played Thursday and then playing Saturday. I think those are unique games. That was more carries, I think, than any other running back in the history of Rutgers football. So the odds of it happening again in a consecutive week, I don't know if that's going to be that'll be the case. But do I think he could do it? I absolutely think he could do it. And I think certainly playing the 10-day window helps that a little bit. But somebody that I think also will be available to us this week that has not been is P.J. James. He's been out running around with us a little more, and we think he'll have some availability for us on Saturday.
Would you characterize this as a very dangerous 1-2 team?
I think they're just a dangerous team in general, regardless of what their record is. They are as physically talented a group as any group will play all year. Their defense plays 9 defensive linemen in the game. So they will have big, strong, really good athletes, and they'll be fresh because they'll rotate them in through the game.
For those of us that, obviously are looking at it from the outside, can you describe the difference that Wilson's going to make for them? If he plays and if he doesn't, just actually physically, how you go about dealing with the team if he's there and if he's not?
We can only go forward and prepare as if he's going to be there. And I think to do it any other way would be a mistake. As I said before, he's one of the elite quarterbacks in the country. So you don't get to be an elite quarterback just on physical talent alone. He's obviously a tremendous leader for their program, and when he steps on the field, he probably makes everybody else in the huddle more confident just by his presence alone. And then you add to that his physical abilities to really make every throw on the field. And then you look at their wide receivers. They got a 6'4" kid on one side, number 17. They got a 6'6" kid on the other side, number 82. They got a tight end who's 6'3", who might be the best athlete on their offense. He's a tremendous football player, number 80. 17 receptions for 226 yards already this year. So they obviously have the weapons around him, and because he can make every throw, he'll make everybody on that offense better just by his presence alone.
Does it seem like this has been a long month because this is the third road games so far in 4 weeks. You sense any fatigue or anything of that?
I don't sense any fatigue. I think, we were well prepared for it with our offseason. And as I said to the team last night, this is the final game of the first third of our season. And it's a unique year because of the way it sets up. We have 4 games, and then we have a bye. And then we have 4 more games, then we have a bye, and then we have 4 more games. So it really is sectioned off in a way that I've never had in any other season. So we're almost treating it like the basketball teams talk about the NCAA tournament. You got to win your mini bracket, then you move on to the next mini bracket. And, they don't look at it as a 6-game tournament. They look at it as 3 2-game tournaments. Well, for us, this is almost like 3 4-game seasons, and this is the 4th game of the first season.
What would a win over a team from the SEC do for your program?
It would allow us to be 4-0. Yeah, and Arkansas is an excellent football team, and they have an excellent program. But I would never want anybody to make any complete judgments or decisions based on one game. I think you have to look at the body of work. And for us, that would allow us to be 4-0. It would allow us to continue, on a very positive start to our season. But then at that point, we'd have to move on. Right now, our focus is on just being 1-0 this week.
What about being maybe on the national map? I mean, if you win this game, you might be ranked. I mean, just to be on the national map.
I don't concern myself with that. If we do well enough during the season, at the end of the year, we'll be ranked, and those ultimately are the ones that you concern yourself with. At this time, I think people are finding their preseason rankings may not have been as accurate as they thought.
You were able to generate turnovers against South Florida. Arkansas had an issue. I think they have 2 takeaways versus 9 turnovers. Is that something you go into every game thinking you can capitalize, or something in particular this game you think you might be able to take advantage of?
In every game, we are trying to, on defense, we're trying to create turnovers. It's one of the statistics. You could talk about the key statistics in a game that ultimately affect winning, and turnovers is always one of them. And I think if you look back at South Florida, and the penalties certainly frustrate us as a coaching staff, and we're working on getting those corrected. You have to, when you look at any game, I think look at what are the things that helped you win or lose the game. And for us last week, it was helped us win the game. But you also have to be critical of what you did and say, okay, what are the things we did in that game that could have cost us the game? For us, the turnover battle was something we did in that game that allowed us or helped us win that football game. And that's every week a focal point. We were able to make that happen last week. We'll certainly be trying to make that happen this week.
Kyle, in Gary Nova's development, what has happened to allow him to get rid of the ball quicker, even if there's nothing there, just to throw it away?
I think it's experience in the system. And you can only get experience by playing. And the most important experiences you get, even though the practice is really important, the most important experiences you're going to get are going to be in the game, in the live fire, against all your competition. So hopefully every week Gary will continue to get a little bit better as he gains more experience.
The early game allowed you guys to do a lot of recruiting. How did that go over the weekend?
I think it went well. We'll find out, the first Wednesday in February ultimately how well it went. But it was nice to be out, and it certainly, we were received very well.
Kyle, how much can this team benefit from a couple extra days of preparation, especially for an SEC team?
I don't know that I would say it, especially for an SEC team. I think it's preparation is an advantage regardless of who your opponent is. And you better approach every football game with a very healthy respect for whoever your opponent is. And we certainly have a very healthy respect for Arkansas, but it has nothing to do with what conference they play in. They're our opponent this week, and we'll have a healthy respect for them. Extra preparation is always a positive. Ultimately, will that turn it into a win for us? We won't find that out until next Saturday. But we did have a practice yesterday, which was a little different than what our normal practice would be because we played Thursday night.
So far this year for you?
He's been tremendous. He's been every bit the playmaker that we need him to be in our defense. He is a difference maker for us. He is in a position in our defense where a lot of things get funneled his way, and we're relying on that guy to make the play, and Kasim has been able to do that.
Kyle, Justin Dorner, what's his inconsistencies? How does he get more consistent, I guess?
I have no doubt in my mind that he will get more consistent. And Justin is going to be as critical of himself as we're going to be of him. But I think when you're a specialist, it's a little bit like being a pitcher. Sometimes you just get in a bad groove and you got to work your way through it. And that's what he's doing. And I have no doubt that he'll get better as the season goes on.
Kyle, obviously you were out recruiting after the South Florida game. So, you have to deal, I'm sure, with other teams using negative recruiting against this team based on the league that you're in. If you were to beat Arkansas, and if you do beat an SEC team, do you think a kind of win like that would have ancillary benefits in terms of national profile and in terms of recruiting?
What I tell recruits when I sense that there's been negative recruiting against us is I try to guard them against the value of your product if you're trying to create more value in your product by devaluing somebody else's product. When we recruit at Rutgers, we recruit for Rutgers. We talk about all the positives of the Rutgers education, all the positives of the Rutgers football program, what we can do for you as a university and as an athletic department. And that's where we end it. That's what we do. Schools that don't do it that way, I've never spent much time concerning myself with, because it seems to be very easy to combat when you get to the times of year where you're allowed to sit with people and their parents and their guardians, in the home. This game is important because it's the only game we get to play this week. It's not important because the team we're playing is from any particular conference around the country. If you want to be a program that talks about winning national championships and winning Big East championships, very few teams around the country can win national championships without winning every week. There's a handful of teams that maybe because they have a conference championship game have a little more room for error. But if you want to talk about winning the national championship, then you have to win your games every week. So regardless of who our opponent is, our goal this week is to be 1-0. It has nothing to do with the conference they play in.
Kyle, the penalties, how do you scale back on those?
We just continue to focus on them in practice and make the players aware of it. They're certainly not intentional, but at the same time, as I said after the game, it is the most glaring part of our program right now where I know we can be a lot better in 10 days.
Just to follow up on that, you've talked about there are some penalties I guess you can live with. Of the 31 so far, how many would you put in that category? Are there 27 that you want to?
I'd have to go back and look. I would say this: there's too many that I can't live with. That really is the way I would say it. There's too many, and we did some things offensively yesterday with hand placement to make sure we're moving in the right direction, and I know we did things on defensively with our tackling circuit so that we're moving in the right direction. So we're working on it every day. But I do think the one thing you have to do when you get in a situation like this is you have to continually make the players aware of it. And we will have, as we've had in the past, officials at practice, and we will be very critical of the players this week in practice to make sure that we get better and we're moving in the right direction on game day, which ultimately is where you're judged.
Coach, considering all the changes on the defensive line through graduation, through injuries, how important has Scott Vallone been this year?
Scott Vallone is one of the leaders on our defense. And he's one of the players that sets the standard for toughness on our defense. So in those two ways, he's extremely critical, for our defense and for our team. He is a guy that when you go into the game, you can rely on him to do his job. That's invaluable as a coach.
Kyle, do you have any relationship with John L. Smith?
I don't. I don't, and I don't think I've ever met him, in passing or anything like that. But I certainly have a lot of respect for what he's been able to do.
Any other questions? Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.